Welcome to today's episode of Simply Honest, the show where we give you an honest yet simple first impression of the latest games with a little bit of gameplay sprinkled in. I'm your host, Nico Silverado, and today we're talking about the amazing game known as Mecha Break. For those who do not know, Mecha Break is a new free-to-play game that is quite genuinely a mecha enjoyer's wet dream. This has everything from the Gundam feel to the chaotic shenanigans that is Overwatch and the high-stakes gameplay of Escape from Tarkov. You'll see what I mean here momentarily. But before we get into it, I just want to say, in general, this game, Mecha Break in general, is something that I did not expect to even come out. Not only to not even come out, I didn't expect this game to be free to play on Xbox Game Pass. And in all honesty, this is something that I feel like as a gamer, I have been asking for, I have been begging for a very, very long time. For a lot of you, if you remember the flop that was Anthem, this to me, Mecha Break, this game is what we should have earned all that time ago. In terms of the world building, the action-packed gameplay, this game has generally rekindled my love for mech-based video games, and it's really exciting to get into this review to tell you guys why I think this will be a really great game for you should you choose to check it out. But in general, some of the biggest things I'll say right at the get-go. This is currently a standalone mech game in an apocalyptic style world. There is a lot of PvP, and there's also a PvE style game mode for those who like extraction shooters, and we'll talk about more of those later on. But I want to get into the jump of it here today and kind of give you my general impressions that I've seen about the game's base design. Right at the get-go, what had me hooked about this game was the overall mech design. After seeing some really cool original trailers for this game, I had assumed this was going to be simply another reworked, reskinned Overwatch title, because from what I remember a couple months back at the time of this recording, we did have a Gundam-based shooter that was basically an Overwatch-style game like this, but unfortunately that game died within about a year. And this game is a bit different because this game kind of sits on its own coattails in regards to how its own unique mech designs, its own unique world, and it doesn't require the hype from a previous IP. This is genuinely its own mech universe, and I am very excited about it. With everything from fully customizable mechs with the various colors and aesthetics that you can choose from, they even have what, to me, a great deal surprise was the wide variety of game modes. This game is absolutely jam-packed with various activities right off the get-go, right during release. You have everything from the more common FPS genres, such as the domination gameplay, where you go in from A, B, and C, capture points, get points, and win. You have the common 6v6, kill each other, free-for-all, game on, good time. And you even have more competitive style game modes like the 3v3 arena mode. And what's really cool is they even have a classic Overwatch style escort the payload game mode. And what even gave me a great degree of shock was the genuine addition and my genuine surprise, I should say, about the extraction shooter game mode. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Not only can you have a classic 6v6 game mode, but you can have your own Escape from Tarkov experience as a mech pilot and dive into an open world extraction shooter where you can take on everyone in the land of Mashmak and battle it out with the various players and even NPCs to make the world even more unique, diverse, and challenging. And as a person who is personally not the biggest fan of PvP style game modes, the extraction shooter game mode is, in my eyes, a very well balanced but yet very rewarding style mode, because it's not only challenging to take on some of the various NPCs, but your mech has the ability to be powerful on its own without the need of pay to win style features. And that we'll get into those later on, but I'll say just the overall first impressions of this game, amazing and beautiful. And speaking of beauty, we're going to be talking about some of the graphic qualities and the graphic W's that I think this game genuinely earns. The design of the overall mechs is something that I think by all means is the key to this game's initial success. All the designs of the games, from their weapons, their abilities, their animations, everything allows each and every mech to be unique in its own right, while also still making some degree of sense in terms of their genuine design. And all the designs are very dynamic, and every mech just is so vibrantly unique. And not even just the mech design, but the world and the environment is super diverse, and I think it really gives a lot of depth into the world itself. And plus the sheer scale of these mechs and how the world reflects that is something that I think is just a really fun minor detail that you really don't realize, that we're literally driving miniature buildings. I mean, if you're, of course, if you're driving things like Stego or Welkin, you're probably driving a literal like miniature skyscraper, but it's fine. Graphically, this game is amazing, and by all means it holds a lot of promise for the future, because when it comes to some of the things that are really cool is just the concept of the world, the concept of the story. And when it comes to like how in depth the story is of this game, one thing I will say with a fair degree of confidence after having played for a bit is that when you jump into the game for the very first time, they do give you a relatively short intro mission. It's about 10 to 15 minutes in length, where you play through the game, learn about the world and some of the basic dangers that exist. And what's really interesting is that the mission gives you a sense of story, but it allows you to, you know, go right into the more fun PvP style game modes without being hyper engrossed into the story mode. And for me personally, the game doesn't necessarily add too much more to the story outside of the main intro mission, as the main focus of this game appears to mostly be the PvP game modes versus a full-on campaign. And towards the end of the video, I want to kind of talk about like some of the things that I'll be thinking would be really cool as a person who's really big into story style games. And some of the things I think that when you look into the game as a whole series, you know, every game has the ability to grow. Every game has their own concepts that I feel like could warrant some degree of revision, some degree of modification. And, you know, with this game being out for only a few weeks at the time of this recording, Mecha Break has a lot of room to grow. Some of the biggest, for lack of words, gripes that I personally had experienced was oftentimes you would find that a lot of the mechs that you would have in this game had, in my opinion, some degree of balancing issues, as many of the abilities that you have in the game tend to feel, of course, very unique, but sometimes it just feels that you're unable to, you know, counter them or work with them at all. For example, you know, playing as some of the faster mechs like Falcon, you have the ability to fly almost endlessly, but yet by simply doing basic barrel rolls and dodges, you can scramble and prevent any player who has lock-on systems from targeting you, which of course allows you to stay in the game for longer. But it does depend on kind of the circumstances and some of the combative situations that I have found during my time. It was a really interesting challenge, and I do believe this game has a very, very high skill ceiling when it comes to the PvP, especially in the extraction shooter, because some of the mechs have greater utility than others, but also there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of gameplay styles should you choose to go about it and give yourself more opportunities to play something new and different. And one of the things I think could be really good when it comes to the effect and the future of Mecha Break is genuinely the addition or the inclusion of more mechs and more weapon drops. Because as of right now, there's a very fair amount of included mechs and included machines that you can kind of fight with and play with, and different weapons, of course. But I do believe that with this game being focused solely on the PvP style aspects, this game does have a threat to have a very shortcoming when it comes to the level of hype and the level of relevancy when it comes to its player base. Now, of course, with the contradiction to what I just said, one of the things that I feel like is going to allow this game to remain relevant for a long time is the sheer number of competitive game modes. Everything from the 6v6 and the 3v3, I think that you have a lot of ways to incorporate a lot more challenges, tournaments, and maybe in the future cases, you might even have something along the lines of a pro series for the 6v6 style game mode, because the gameplay when you're doing everything in the combat is extremely fast paced. And one of the things that's really fun about this combat in this game is the fact that the overall combat in Mecha Break is a 360 degree situation. You're dealing with ups, downs, left and right, and in some cases even under you, as a lot of the engagements in this game are non-stop, high octane, high action, because every mech in the game has the ability to absolutely zoom. And what's really nice is that, you know, with the inclusion of like the lock-on system, it does get rid of the skill ceiling of, you know, having to try to aim and, you know, hopefully lock on all your missiles, because for lack of better words, every mech has aimbot, and every mech has the ability to hit headshots, hit long shots, however you need. And I think that as they add more mechs, they are going to need to do a lot more rebalancing, reorganization of how and where mods and abilities are. But I think that this will kind of come down to the overall ingenuity of the developers in regards to making additional mechs for us to try out. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to give a try and to see what overall they'll maybe do with the inclusion of new content. Now, one of the things I had mentioned in the beginning of the video was the inclusion of a campaign. As an individual who is a very, very big advocate for story-based games, campaigns, and just pure PvE shenanigans, one of the things I think that this game, Mecha Break, could actually incorporate is the involvement of a pure solo player, maybe even co-op, PvE style series, where if you remember certain older games such as Mech Assault, the game back then allowed you to go through a whole campaign where you went through a whole story and you had to play through every single mech in some way, shape, and fashion. And I think that the campaign could go in a lot of ways. A campaign where your pilot has to go through a whole story of defending the world, and they at some point have to play with every single base mech in order to get through the story and get through the world. And then maybe as a new game plus, you could probably play through the game as your preferred mech. But I think having a campaign that incorporates the exploration of all these different gameplay styles for the mechs would really allow the players to have a lot more fun, to not only learn the mechs, but also maybe even appreciate them. But of course, I believe at this time, campaigns are becoming a very close dying art of gaming, and everything's becoming battle passes, PvP, but that's a whole other opinion for a whole other video. And like I said, I think one of the biggest things is that assuming that Mecha Break is able to maintain its player count past the 6-month mark, this is a game that has currently a big risk of losing a lot of players should not enough interesting and compelling content be released. One of the biggest issues that comes to games like this is that, you know, everyone's going to end up finding another 6v6 arena shooter, and the mechs themselves are, as of right now, very unique and very inviting to try out and play as. It's just one of those where we're going to have a really hard time seeing the longevity of this game unless additional content is made. As we approach some of my final thoughts in regards to how I believe Mecha Break is going to hold out over the course of the next couple of months during its initial release, I firmly believe that after putting a large amount of time into some of the multiplayer and some of the other things in regards to the fan reactions and the fan reception of the game, I believe Mecha Break is going to go into one of two possible routes. In my personal opinion, Mecha Break is by no means a Game of the Year contender. It is a fantastic game that has a lot of fun dynamics, a lot of fun graphics, and it has the potential to make a lot of really fun engagements and a lot of fun activities for players via specialized events or even holiday events. But I don't foresee this game being a long-lasting game unless the developers can genuinely dedicate a lot more of their time and their efforts towards adding more content, and in all hopes, making players find more reasons to play and making just very frequent content updates. Because with a live service game like this game, in my opinion, has a potential shelf life of around 6 to 8 months before something new will happen, or before people are going to find that there's not much more to play within the game. I do believe Mecha Break is a very fantastic game for anyone who wishes to look into playing a game that is fun dynamically and overall very entertaining in terms of the skill gap and the overall combat. And I'm very curious to see how this game will overall be able to last in the long run, seeing as how with this game supporting its own IP of its own unique mech designs, I hope that Mecha Break is going to be able to withstand the test of time, and if we're all lucky, we'll be able to see Mecha Break last for quite a bit, especially with multiple long-term updates. But as we wrap up here today, as always, if you guys ended up enjoying today's review, consider dreaming a like, drop a follow, join us on Twitch if you guys want to join us for some of the various live recordings. And if you have any suggestions for some other really fun games you think we should try out during the course of our various reviews, let me know down in the comment section and we'll add that to our ever-growing list. But as always, I've been your great and amazing reviewer, Nico Silverado. Have a great one, and as always and forever, adios, sayonara. We'll see you guys all on the next game review. Bye-bye.